Hello again, everyone. Today I am here with a flip through of my completed Wanderlust 2022 sketchbook. So I took Wanderlust 2022 and I just recently completed all the lessons in that course. And I have already signed up for 2023's Wanderlust, and it's really a great class. So basically, for those of you that don't know, there's a different instructor every week, and then there is sort of like a hero supply for a few weeks in a row, and then it always changes. So one of the things that's also true of 2023 is that it's not duplicating things in 2022. So there are new supplies than what there were in 2022. But at the beginning, like in last January, I was a little bit skeptical as to whether I would stick with it. But each week, I've really been able to take at least something from the lessons and kind of run with it with my own ideas. And I've learned a lot. And I think also my drawing skills and composition skills and that sort of thing have improved over the year. So this is the big old chunky notebook. It's pretty much, there's only like 1 or 2 pages left at the end of this. And one other thing is that, so this is the main sketchbook, and this can be any size. I just chose this size and this particular type of notebook because it seemed like the best sort of all over paper that's in here, and also the size was more manageable given the frequency of the lessons. They are every week, so it's quite a bit. And given that they are every week, you do really get quite a bit for your money in the class. And I think registration is still happening now. I'll put a link down below and you can see what you think. All right, well, let's go ahead and get in here. Oh, and what I wanted to say, so this is the main sketchbook for the class, but there's also the option to have a few different lessons throughout the year that are done on loose sheets of paper, and then at the end of the year, it would be turned into a separate sketchbook. So I originally started with that idea in mind of doing that, the 2 separate sketchbooks, but towards the end, I just didn't really want to make a separate sketchbook. So I incorporated those lessons and the finished products into this sketchbook. So this is basically everything, and this book will not close. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. I mean, it's so chunky because there's a lot of collage first off, and then, you know, things that are affixed to the pages, it just chunks up pretty quick. I'm wondering if I should put an elastic band around it or something so that it doesn't fly away, but I still haven't decided that yet. And part of it is kind of satisfying to see this big chunky book here with all except for maybe 1 or 2 at the end, pages completed. All right, so I'm going to go through and so some of these I labeled with the week and the artist that was teaching the course that week, and some I did not label, and some of these are actually out of order. So there's not, most of them are in order, but some of them are in the wrong place. Sometimes because of my mistake of picking a page which was not sequential, or because I did add in some of the single lessons that had, that the idea was to incorporate in a second sketchbook. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start. So we started with the word of the year. I actually had 2 words of the year for 2022, which was more happiness. And we did a little self-portrait as our first lesson. So this was indeed the first lesson, but this was normally, or it was supposed to be a loose sheet of paper, and then I did glue it into the book afterwards because I had left this first page blank because I wanted to do 2-page spreads throughout the book, and this only has 1, but this was just a single page, so I put it in there at the end. And I think the 2023 is starting off the same way of starting with your word of the year. I'm pretty sure that I want my my word of the year for 2023 to be peace. The course's instructor, the main instructor, she chose that word, but I was already thinking about that word. Maybe everyone just wants some peace this year. So I think that's going to be my word of 2023. I kind of like the idea of doing words as opposed to resolutions, because then you can sort of have an intention for the rest of the year. I do kind of like that. Okay, so I'm just going to flip through. I'm not necessarily going to focus too much on each one. This course was obviously focusing on contrast, so it was a pretty simple spread. And then this is actually by one of the instructors, Carolyn Dubé, I think, or Doobie. And her color palette is probably the exact opposite of my color palette. So I sometimes struggle with her lessons because I need to find something that connects it to what I like. So this was sort of, you know, what I did. And this is nothing like the original lesson, but it did take the methods from the original lesson. And you'll also notice that I have one of my little assemblages here. I did insert them at in certain spreads where I thought it kind of zhuzhed up the spread a little bit and made it more complete. So you will see that a little bit. And for those of you that don't know, I did these in last year's Fodder School, in Fodder School 1. And this was one of my favorite classes, and mine are actually completely different than the instructors. She did a completely different thing. I kind of went mini with them, with animals and stuff, but I really, really love them. And actually, I would like to make a new batch of these, just because I've pretty much used almost all of these. All right. And this is Lally Mill. Lally Mill, her style is very distinct, and she does a lot of neutrals and tone on tone with neutral colors. So you can definitely see the influence of that. But I really do love Lally Mill. She's a great teacher, and I've taken classes from her directly and through this class. And this was another one that was very outside of my comfort zone, because first off, I don't really like drawing or painting people. I mean, I'm not the greatest at doing it. I have taken like figure drawing classes and that sort of thing, but I've never been like the best at it. So I do have sort of the basics about the structure of the face and body and that sort of thing. But I generally don't like doing it, so I had not done it a lot. So this is one, obviously this is more abstract, but you'll see later on there are some more detailed portraits that I actually saved all of the portraits till the end of the course. And I think I'm kind of glad I did, because they were less intimidating after I'd finished everything else. And I really liked doing them, and I actually think they didn't turn out that badly. So this is Mary Beth Shaw. And like I said, I didn't label all of them. This is Jean Oliver, who actually has a really fun style with things. This was all very neutral, and I thought this little bird actually went really quite well with sort of the botanical theme here. And I do think that I have sort of a progression of, and these are all sort of like, you know, because they're once a week, I didn't put a huge amount of effort into each one, because the idea is to have it be, you know, the ability to do a little bit of art every week. So these aren't completed to the point where I would actually complete a finished piece necessarily. Some of them are, but they're definitely a way to learn every week. And I was going to say that I can see my improvement through the notebook here. This was actually a really fun class as well by Melissa Fink. She does a lot of botanicals with watercolor and pastels and things. And this was a fun one. It's another Lally Mill. You can tell with the more muted colors. This was supposed to be a portrait, actually, and instead I did it of my dog. Yeah, and you can kind of see, like, I haven't consistently stuck with just my style. I have kind of adapted some of the instructor's style with each of these, and some of them, if I already had materials, like the materials that they were making that week, I would use some of my own materials. Like some of these collage papers are from Fodder School. These are some hand-carved stamps that I had already done, even though they were focusing a little bit on making your own stamps in this week. And this is more of a style in the composition, and you know, how to structure the page, which I thought was kind of fun. And this one was just pure play. I'm not so crazy about the result, but I think that it did really get me to play around with color and realize that I really like pink. I've definitely been leaning pink and sort of orangish yellow, which is kind of interesting. And a little bit more green too. So this is one of the portraits, and I did save this till the end. And I do think that at various points I liked this a little bit better than the final result, but I'm overall pretty happy with it. And it really did teach me how to, you know, what parts of the face have light and dark, and how to get this kind of result where it looks a little bit more naturalistic. It's still stylized, but I'm actually most proud of the nose on this one because I always have trouble with the nose. So I think the nose actually came out looking like a pretty real nose, which was impressive to me. And this is another Lally Mill class where we played with a little bit more color. And this is one of my favorite spreads in here as well. And this was fun. This was working with layers of acrylic, transparent layers, and working it up, and I thought it was very nice. This is another really abstract class. And I think you can still find the list of 2022's instructors too, because like I said, I've labeled some of them, but not all of them are labeled with the instructor. And this was actually part of a larger piece where we were just supposed to go really loose and, you know, paint basically whatever we wanted. So I did a rabbit with flowers. And this was also using craft acrylics. And I did actually use, oh my goodness, Paper Artsy. That's the name of the colors. And I really like them. They're probably my favorite of the craft acrylics. And this is obviously a very busy page. And then here is sort of a portrait. I actually didn't skip this one because it's more stylized and it was more about, you know, how to compose the page and that sort of thing. But this is like completely out of my comfort zone, especially stylized faces. I kind of, well, if I'm going to draw a face, I kind of like it to be maybe the suggestion of a face, or try to make it more realistic. Because I just feel like if I try to stylize a face, I just don't really like the style. Like this seems a little childlike to me, which there's nothing wrong with that. It just is not my style. And this is obviously not as good as the original instructors either. What's her name? Kate Crane. But this is just, it just didn't fit with me. And that's actually one of the nice things about this class, is you do kind of get to experience different styles and say, oh, this style is not really for me, or I do like this style. And then I can incorporate those things, you know, throughout. This is another spread using some of my handmade stamps. And this is actually one of my favorite spreads as well, just because I like its simplicity and it's kind of clean, whereas some of these can be a little bit more messy. Oh, and this was done on a separate sheet of watercolor paper. So this was a little lesson of putting jellyfish underneath the water here. That was kind of fun. Although I have to say I kind of liked this drawing before I added the jellyfish, but it's all a learning process. This is another Mary Beth Shaw. I really like her style, but whenever I take one of her lessons, I tend to go really, really busy. So, but I love elements of this. So maybe, you know, take this and tone it down, and that would probably be closer to what my style is. And this was really fun using watercolors in this different way. And this was one, so this is Wendy Solganic, who is one of the main instructors and people who've put together Fodder School. And this is one, I love this lesson, but this is one of those that I really wish I had not done on the paper that's in this sketchbook. This is probably, I mean, it's probably like mixed media, but not like made for watercolor. And I had a real hard time with watercolor flow here. And that's kind of part of what the lesson was about, was getting watercolors to flow. So I think if I had done this on a different piece of watercolor paper and pasted it in like I did with the other one, it probably would have turned out a little bit better. Because this is another example of one where I did it on a separate sheet of watercolor paper and then put it in the book. And these were the colors that the instructor used. This was just sort of a light tracing of a face, and then you know, figuring out how to do darks and lights with watercolor and kind of develop the contour of the face. These colors would not have been my choice, even though I do like blue and I do like yellow. This particular blue and yellow I might not choose as my own color palette for something like this, but I chose to go with the color palette of the instructor because I didn't want to think about the colors. I just kind of wanted to focus on, you know, getting the portrait done and kind of getting it to actually look like a person, which I think I succeeded at. And I really like this one too. This was, although I didn't do it on separate watercolor paper, this is watercolor, but there's some gesso scattered throughout the page underneath, and I think that made it look really interesting. And I used some really interesting watercolors as well. And this was another Lally Mill lesson, and I kind of struggled to find my way on this one, but I really like how it turned out, and it ended up being another one of my favorites in the book. Okay, and this one, I kind of went a completely different direction than what this original thing was, but at the time that this course came around, I had been doing these little handmade stamps in fodder school, so I incorporated those, and I had some of these older envelopes, so I used those as well. And then I was also starting to play with some of the Tim Holtz products, so in these little inserts, if I can get it out here, I actually used some, you know, die cuts and little ephemera bits from Tim Holtz, so that was kind of fun to incorporate there. And yeah, and this was all about inks. So inks and texture. I don't know if you can see too well the texture on the page, but there is quite a bit of texture. I love, love, love this, this paper, this vintage paper. I don't have a lot of it though, so I've been trying to use it more sparingly. And now after the fact, I kind of wish I had actually like cut out the middle part, so I still have that, but you know, I shouldn't treat any of my art supplies like they're super precious. But here I also incorporated some of these stamps and die cuts and some little cards that I actually had made in fodder school already to incorporate into this more textural thing. All right, and this was with acrylic ink and was kind of fun. Basically we ended up with all these acrylic ink blobs, and then it was sort of like a Rorschach test of, you know, what can you see in those? And to me it looked a little bit like an ocean scene, so I ended up putting this little fish here. This is supposed to be coral, although I don't know that it really comes off fully as coral. And this was supposed to be, you know, like looking down from the ocean to the above ocean and seeing the light up there. And this is another Carolyn Dubé or Doobie lesson. And again, I went in a completely different direction. And she uses, for this one, she uses a bunch of little tiny random pieces of paper that she had originally made as sort of like collage sheets. So I just took some collage sheets that I had and put them in a very geometric layout. And I actually really like this. This is actually one of my favorites in here as well. So it's kind of always, sometimes it's kind of surprising to me which things end up being favorites. Okay, so some pages I ended up having to glue over. I can't remember why, but I did. All right. So I like this one as well, even though it's a little bit busy. I kind of wish there was a little bit more white space in there, but again, I was just kind of going with the instructor on this one. And this portrait, I actually really like, and even though it's more stylized, it's kind of like in between. There's the, you know, accurate proportions and that sort of thing in the portrait, but then it was done in a really loose way, which I really enjoyed. So, you know, if I did incorporate more portraits into my work, I think I would head more this direction. And because it ended up being only one side, I added this was, so I was trying some colors for this because we were doing non-traditional colors for the portrait, and one of the colors one of my mixed colors just turned into this really dark green. I'm like, I can't use that. So I used it on this other sheet, and I think it actually looks quite nice as a contrast to the other side of the page, which is why I included that there. And then on this one, I'm incorporating some stamps. These are Stampers Anonymous stamps in the Tim Holtz collection. More Tim Holtz stuff. And then these original papers were, at least, you know, these here were done with fodder school papers. So, you know, if ever I didn't have a lot of time, I would, you know, do that. And this original lesson was completely out of my style, and I just didn't want to do it in that style, but I took sort of the ideas of that class and turned it into something else. And then these are little Tim Holtz paper dolls with little wings, and this is actually Tyvek, which you can bubble up if you iron it. I actually made it bubble in a different way, and anyway, I had taken a different class that used Tyvek in that way. But if you're interested, you could probably look up Tyvek bubbling or something. It's pretty fun to add to mixed media. And this one, so this one, I didn't do both parts of the lesson. There were two parts of the lesson. So this is using alcohol ink and a stencil. And then on the other side, we were supposed to put an image transfer and color it with colored pencil. I opted not to do that just because, part of the reason is because I did want to put it in the sketchbook so that it would be like a 2-page spread. And the other part was I just didn't have the time to go into that much detail, and there were a lot of steps to that. But this is the part of the lesson, and I had done image transfers before, so it wasn't necessarily something new to me, but this process was new to me, so I went ahead and did this. And actually, when I did this, the stencil itself turned out really, really cool. So I'm actually thinking of keeping the stencil with the alcohol ink on it and just cutting it up and using it in some other projects. And this, I love this portrait, actually, even though, you know, it's not a perfect portrait. Obviously, this was supposed to be a self-portrait, and it doesn't entirely look like me. There's a little bit that looks like me in there, but I used some fodder school papers that were kind of, you know, grungy looking, and did this portrait over the top, and then there's an overlay of another piece of paper. Yeah, when you see it head on, you can't really see that additional element over the top too well, and then there's some stitching on the bottom. But this was really fun, and part of it is I love working with charcoal, and this was working with charcoal, but charcoal is so messy, and that's generally why I don't work with it a lot. But when I do work with it, I remember, man, I really like charcoal, so I probably should get back into it again and just, you know, be careful about cleaning up. And this is one of my favorite spreads too. I took a long time doing this one because it seemed kind of detailed as far as the number of steps, but I really do love this one. This is another Lally Mill course, and I really like how this one turned out. And I used some of the skeleton leaves that I had been saving up. I actually purchased these. I don't even think you can get them anymore, but I've had them around for a while. And this one I really love too, because this is really my style. You know, adding watercolor and little animals and stitching. This is just, you know, right up my alley. And then here we have this, I think this was an image transfer using some sort of different method that I couldn't remember. This is one of those pages that was supposed to be in the little separate book. So were these, and this was a 2-sided piece of paper, so I just made this a little insert in this book. So we did sort of a floral on the back of this, and then this is carried over to here. This is one of the first portraits I did, just all right. But this was about an artist, and then, you know, here was a bouquet of flowers, and then this lesson in there. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, so these were earlier in the course, and I just kind of stuck them in here at the end because that's where I had space. And this was actually, I can't remember if it was the last lesson in the course, but it's definitely the last lesson. Yeah, I think it is the last lesson in the course that I finished. So really enjoyed this one. I didn't necessarily save it for last, it just was the last class. All right, well, that's all I had for you today. I don't think there's anything else in this book. No, so as you can see, there's only, oops, There's only 2 pages left back here, and I probably won't do anything with them. I'll just leave them. But I'm really proud of myself for ending up doing all of the lessons, and I think I learned something from, you know, 99.9% of the courses. Some were a little repetitive of things I already knew, but a lot of them were teaching me something new, so I was really excited about that. I'm a little bit late starting the Wanderlust 2023, but I am going to try and catch up so that I can kind of keep up after a certain point. But that's all I had for you today. I'm going to put a link down below to Wanderlust so you can check it out yourself. If you have any questions about the course or anything else, just ask me down below and I'll answer when I can. All right, well, if you would like to keep track of future videos on my channel, please subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. I hope to see you next time, but in the meantime, have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye.